what I want to kind of do today is, give you skills to help you increase your odds of succeeding. So I'm going to make up some time here, and I'm from New York, so I'm going to go fast, and we got a lot to cover. So let me just talk really quickly about why disciplined entrepreneurship was created. And then we're going to get right into activities. And I love it that, Gareth, you have these tables, because you're going to be working at these tables, because you can't learn entrepreneurship just by having someone talk to you. But let me just tell you a few things. First of all, I was an entrepreneur. My background is I was an engineer from Harvard, which they think is hysterically funny at MIT, because Harvard's an arts and crafts school. How can they have engineering? But I played basketball in England for a year, another strange thing. And then I worked at IBM for 11 years. And then I went back, they sent me back to MIT. And when I left MIT in 1994, I started my first company. And I got smashed. I realized that all that stuff at IBM wasn't helping me to start a company. And I was frustrated because they didn't teach me that at MIT. So it took me my first company to really start to figure out what was going on in entrepreneurship. And then I did my second company, and which did much better, infinitely better. If you're a mathematician and the denominator's 0, anything is infinite. These are MIT jokes. Are you with me on it? Yeah. And then the third company did really well, and I didn't improve, my IQ didn't go up. What happened was I learned the fundamentals of entrepreneurship. And so I went back and I said, you at MIT really need to teach entrepreneurship. It can be taught, but you're not doing a good job of it. And so what happens in a situation is like that. They say, thank you very much for volunteering. And so I ended up giving a talk and then teaching a class and ended up teaching another class. But in that process, I put together all those things that were out there that I had learned in this book and that book and the like. And I'll show you some of that. And so what you're going to hear is stuff that's not original. I don't have original thoughts. But what I found were the good pieces around that were useful and helped put them together. And so that's what I'm going to do. And just to give you a sense of it, it has been it not only worked for me, it's been working for other people. And it's not an algorithm, as I'm going to tell you, but it gives you first principles that help you to increase your odds of success. So there's a whole lot about entrepreneurship, but let me just tell you the things that people say about entrepreneurship which are not true, all right? I just want to go through these quickly because they're conventional wisdom, and I talk about how Mark Zuckerberg has done more damage to entrepreneurship than he has good, because everybody thinks, oh, I'll be like Mark Zuckerberg, and they take lessons from that are not true. Entrepreneurs are mercurial individualists. I've seen the movie. So I saw Steve Jobs. I saw Mark Zuckerberg. I read about Elon Musk. You have to be like this ruthless person and step on other people, and not true. The data is very clear that entrepreneurship is a team sport. It is not an individual sport. Your odds of success are substantially increased if you have 2 people as opposed to 1, 3 as opposed to 2 on the founding team. Doesn't mean they'll all be there, 5 years from now. But entrepreneurship is a team sport, and it's getting more so as the world gets more complicated. And once you recognize that it's a team sport, you cannot be a jerk. You have to build a team that's coherent and works together. So entrepreneurship is a team sport, not an individual sport. It's not about being entrepreneurship is about being smart. You have to be, in the world, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates were 256-bit processors when everybody else was a 64-bit processor. I'm sorry, these are MIT types of things. But that's not true. It is not about how smart you are in entrepreneurship. In fact, do you have valedictorians here? Do you know what a valedictorian is? It's the student in the school that gets the highest grade in all the classes and they acknowledge at the end. Do you have a word for that here? Smart. Well, anyway, in the United States, it's called valedictorian, the person who got the highest grades and everything, and that person's acknowledged and talks at graduation. Turns out that person is not very likely to be an entrepreneur. First of all, because it's not about smarts, and second of all, they're always trying to please somebody. Whereas entrepreneurs get really interested in something, and then they go really, really deep in it, and they understand everything there is to know about that. So in my companies, I didn't know much about haptics. But once I got into it, I knew everything there was to know about haptics. If you asked me about other stuff, I didn't know. It was this very deep in one thing and kind of a T thing. So it's not about intelligence. It's not about passion. It's really more about, and don't take this word the wrong way, it's more about obsession. If you're going to do something, do it really, really well. And it doesn't mean you're the smartest. It just means you read everything there is, you try it, you're really kind of obsessed about knowing about it. So it's not about smarts. It's not about people say, well, my parents weren't entrepreneurs, and I don't have this gene to be an entrepreneur. That's all BS. The data shows, again with research by Ed Roberts at MIT, that if your parents are entrepreneurs, doesn't make you more likely to be an entrepreneur. There's no inherent singular characteristic that you need. You need teams that have people who are good at different parts. You want someone who's good at bringing product to market. You want someone who's good at the business aspects of it and kind of the sales part. You want someone who's good at design. But it's not like you need extroverts. An extrovert makes you a better one. It's a team sport, so you need to build those things in. The other one is entrepreneurs love risk. I can't be an entrepreneur because I love risk. This is ridiculous. I should say this is ridiculous. I'm an entrepreneur. I think it's like the stupidest thing in the world. No offense to people who like to go to a casino and spend money, and think you're going to make money. That's like ridiculous. The math is very clear. The odds are against you to do it, and there's no reason to think that you can defy the odds at a casino, right? And no entrepreneur that I know thinks that way. What they do is they think about how can they take risk, informed risk, where the odds are in their favor, where they have some competitive advantage, where they have some information asymmetry, where they have something where they can win. And I'll just give you the example of this. Have you seen the movie about the MIT blackjack team? It's called the book was called Bringing Down the House. The movie was called 21. Some of you have, many of you haven't. So at MIT, which is a very different type of school, they had we didn't sanction it, we didn't stop it, but they had a bunch of students that would learn how to play blackjack really well, and then they would go to casinos. Now, people say, well, look, they took risk. No, they didn't. Let me just go through what they did. When they went to a casino, they played one game and one game only, and that was blackjack. That's why they call it the blackjack team, right? So, and why do they play blackjack? First of all, the odds are the best. If you go to play a roulette wheel, you're out of your mind. But blackjack, the odds are closer for you, but they're still not in your favor. But there are two other things. You have an impact on that, right? You make decisions that can improve the odds, right? It's like poker. You could do that. But the other thing about blackjack is what? You can flip the odds in your favor if you do what? Count the cards. Right. So the MIT blackjack team knew that if they played blackjack and they could count the cards, they could make the decisions to swing the odds in their favor. And casinos know this, and so they watch the casino table, they watch the blackjack tables extremely closely. And so what the MIT team did is they had this other insight, which they don't talk about in the movie. So if the team was the four of us, then we would go into a casino and we organized it. Again, by the way, these blackjack players became entrepreneurs at the end of it. I thought they'd become hedge fund managers, but it turns out they become entrepreneurs because they love the teamwork of it as opposed to just the algorithm of it. And so what they do is they would go into a casino and they would practice in the basements of MIT. And so the two of us might go, or actually the two of us might go up to the table, and I'd be there kind of on the table drawing attention, but he's going to be the one who's going to be betting because I'm drawing attention, but he's going to be the guy who's winning the money. And the two of them would have entered the casino as a false couple, and they'll be over there. And so we're at the table, and the two of us are at the table. We can't count the cards because they're watching us really closely. Someone has to count the cards and signal to us what's going on. Now you'd say, who's going to signal to us? Who's going to count the cards and signal to us? Well, we've got these other two people, right? They're not sitting at the table. And the person who's actually counting the cards is her. Why is it her? Sorry? Why is nobody looking at her? No. Yeah, that's right. Say that again? She's a woman. And why would that matter? That's right. There was gender bias involved that these people weren't looking for the woman to do it. I'm not saying this is the right thing. and what happened was that the MIT women were extraordinarily good at it. They're every bit as good. But their whole kind of model was that they were looking at the males here, and they weren't looking at her to figure out if she's counting the cards. She's counting the cards, getting it over, and sometimes she's translating to him, and he's getting it over. But they couldn't crack it. If you see the movie, they end up throwing the MIT blackjack team out, and they never figure out that it's the woman that's counting the cards until later, after this is done. What's the point here? The point is that they took risk, and they were okay with losing in the short term because they knew in the long term the odds were going to be in their favor because they had this insight and they had information asymmetry. They had information that other people weren't getting. They had this insight. And that's what you're looking for in a business. You're looking for something where you take some risk, but that risk is well worth it. And the idea that, I've seen the Steve Jobs movie, and, to be a successful entrepreneur, he just gets people in the reality distortion zone. That's how you be a great entrepreneur. That is not true. If you are an entrepreneur, you need to build up a positive reputation. And if I sell a product to her and it is not a good product because I got her in the reality distortion zone, not only is that not good, it's really bad because now she's going to tell other people that it's not a good product. And to get out of that, the research shows that to get a good reputation, you've got to sell a lot of products. To get a bad reputation, how many bad products does it take? One, right? Just like a reputation. It takes a long time to build up a good reputation. It can take one night to ruin that reputation. And so it's not about that. Yes, you have to have people who know how to sell, but you have to produce real value underneath it. And then it's entrepreneurs are lucky. And, not that Malcolm Gladwell is a rigorous scientist, but he showed in the book Outliers that, when people anticipate an opportunity and they spend a lot of time preparing for it, be it Bill Gates, be it the Beatles, they realize something is going to happen in the future, and they spend, he calls it 10,000 hours, getting ready for that opportunity so that when it happens, they capitalize on it. Then people say, oh, look, they're lucky. But Bill Gates and Bill Joy knew that computing was going to be going online, and they went and they got really good at it, so when the day came, they could seize the moment. And the Beatles knew that music was going to change, and they spent their 10,000 hours, and it's great to come to some place where the people know the Beatles. My students don't know the Beatles. It's bizarre. But they spent their time in the beer halls of Germany getting ready. Now, today you have people who say, AdMob, they knew that the people were going to have smartphones, and they spent a whole lot of time looking at the mobility question and how can they do advertising on phones. And they got $1 billion company out of it, and they were the leaders in it because they anticipated where it was going. It's just like the sports saying, Wayne Gretzky, why are you so good? You're not, you're not nearly as good an athlete. He said, because everybody seems to skate to where the puck is. I try to figure out where the puck is going and skate there. And that's what this is about. And it appears lucky, but there is thought process that goes on. And this is one that was really clear to me. I worked at IBM, and I appeared to be the epitome of discipline every day. Getting in at 8 o'clock in the morning, wearing suits, saying all the right things in meetings, and just marching along through the day. And I thought I was, and then I did my startup, and I realized that stuff didn't matter at all. The only thing that matters in a startup is, do you figure out what your product is that a customer wants that will pay it for you, and then you can sell more of those and make money. Because if you don't make payroll. Whereas when I was at IBM, I never even, I didn't understand, payroll was something that had to be met. It just came magically, in a check every month. But in a startup, you get this very clear closed loop discipline that makes all the difference in the world. So all these concepts that people have about entrepreneurship are not quite true. And there's two other ones I just want to point out. And is that entrepreneurship, you've heard the numbers, entrepreneurs fail 99% of the time. You've heard that? It's like less than 1% succeed. I'll tell you, well-trained entrepreneurs succeed much more than that. And again, I'll go to the book by Malcolm Gladwell called David and Goliath. And he talks about how Goliath, the biblical story, Goliath is the giant and nobody wants to fight him. And so they finally get David to fight him. And David comes out and he says, all right, great, come and fight me. And he says, no, I'm not going to fight you like the way you want. I'm going to run around in the bushes with a slingshot and shoot it at you. And he goes, no, come out and fight me like a man. That's how we're going to fight. And they're like, no, I'm not going to fight you like that. And David takes down Goliath, because Goliath's very strength, when David changes the rules, becomes a liability. Because now, when you're running around with a slingshot, the big size of Goliath is a liability. The fact that he's so big and strong, when he's nimbly running around, becomes a liability as well, because he can't chase him around. And so by entrepreneurs changing the rules of the game, the odds are much, much higher. And he talks about this in military, where over 60% of the military battles, when David takes on Goliath, David wins. The British were Goliath. Yes? The Revolutionary War. Yes. And there's no way that that the Americans should have beat them. And yet they did, because they applied a David strategy against that. Over and over in military battles, it's not the David that wins it's not the Goliath that wins if the David changes it. So let me just transfer that back to what we see with our students. Our success rate for entrepreneurs at MIT is like 60%, and now it's gone up to 75% with the people who go through our programs. If you know the game, the odds are not nearly as bad as you think. The next one I just want to say is the most overrated thing in entrepreneurship is the original idea. Everybody says, I need a disruptive technology. BS. Was Google a disruptive technology? There were tons of search engines and websites that did that. Was Facebook a new idea? No, there was Friendster, there was MySpace, was the iPhone. And there's a person who's much smarter than I, named Bengt Holmstrom, he has a little medal that he wears around. Actually, doesn't wear it, but we know it's there. It's called a Nobel Prize. And he gave this study about how, the name of it was, is disruptive technology overrated? And he goes through and he points out that over 90% of the value created in the world is by taking an existing idea and then reapplying it in a new context and adjusting it 5% to the right or 10% to the left. So this idea that you need a breakthrough new idea, it isn't true. And Nat Marx's research also showed that the original idea isn't where you end up anyway. You start off with an idea, and then you figure out who's your customer, what do they want, in a methodical way. And the most important thing is the team. And that's why it was so good to have Gareth talking about the team. And I would encourage you. I have people come see me all the time, and they say, I want to talk to you about my idea. And I kind of gracefully, or not so gracefully, say, oh, that's interesting. Tell me about your team first. And then they'll come back later and they'll say, well, we're thinking of changing our idea. I said, that's great. Are you changing your team? Because I'll take a great team with a mediocre idea every day of the week and twice on Saturday and Sunday over someone who thinks they have a breakthrough idea. So don't get obsessed with the idea. You know, we're going to talk about the process here. We have incredibly mediocre ideas that turn into very good companies, or I shouldn't say mediocre ideas, obvious ideas. You know, we need to do a better job on the cloud. Is now a $15 billion company called Okta. So the last thing I'll do, and then we'll get into actual exercises, entrepreneurship is not a science, and it will never be a science. If anyone ever tells you they've got an algorithm for entrepreneurship, it's just not possible. It's just not possible. Why do I know that it's not possible? Because you're doing something that has never been done before. That's the point of entrepreneurship. You're creating something new. There's no algorithm that can get you to some place that's never been done before. Every entrepreneurial venture is new in its own way. So there can't be an algorithm to tell you how to do something that's never been done before. That's not the way it works. It can't be deterministic. It's also a complicated system. So then people say, well, then it's art. It's like, no, if it was art, then engineers couldn't do that because art has feelings and some other stuff that I don't understand. It's actually a craft. And by that I mean a craft is everybody can do it. Everyone in this room could do pottery. It's not something that you can't do. And everyone in this room can do entrepreneurship, no question. But you still are building unique new products. And the other thing is you can learn it. It's something that as you do more of it, you learn over time. There are first principles that if you learn, it improves your odds of success, but it's not an algorithm. And the last thing is it needs to be taught in a different way, in an apprenticeship model, as opposed to just a lecture model. So I have papers on this stuff if you're interested. And the last thing I'll just say is, no, actually there's two things I'll say is, there's this thing called small medium enterprises which focus on local markets. Did you talk about this at all? Yeah, a little bit. You did? Okay. So SME, someone who comes up with a restaurant, dry cleaner, this is essentially a service business. And everyone in this room can do this for sure. That you can buy something for $3 and sell it for $5. You can be a trader. You can set up an IT service company. That doesn't make you scalable to go to sell it in London or in Scotland or in the United States. You're focused on providing a service locally. What we're looking at is creating innovation-driven enterprise companies, or it could be ventures within bigger companies. And when you do that, you're looking at markets that are bigger than just the local market. And to do that, you can't just, a dentist just adds another chair and they get more money. But what we're talking about is producing products that you can ship. So there's going to be this stage where you have to invest, but you don't see results. You don't get immediate results. The delta T, the response time of this system is longer than this one. These are seem like lower risk. These, arguably are higher risk, but there's a methodology to mitigate that risk. But when you get these right, you get exponential growth, and it doesn't kind of cap out because your market's local. So we're going to focus on doing this, and I would encourage you. This is what I do. People say it works for that, but this is what I really focus on. And there's an exposure. If you set this up, you set up a nice bookstore that resells books in Newport or Cardiff or wherever it is. You feel good, but what happens then? Amazon comes along, which is an IDE, and they say, we're going to have a new way to sell books, and you get blown out of the water. Now, that doesn't happen all the time, but those are the kind of companies that transform economies. The last thing I want to say is that we talk about the 4 H's. Well, everybody loves this slide. So you have to have the heart to be an entrepreneur. You have to be willing to be different. If all the fish are swimming this way, you have to be willing to swim that way. And not only be willing, but enjoy being different. And sometimes this is a cultural problem. But this is important, and we cultivate this. And Gareth's environment would cultivate this as well. And this is why you see entrepreneurs kind of coming together. And this creative irreverence or hacking the system, and there are these stickers that you may write. We consciously encourage people, it's more fun to be a pirate than to join the Navy. And that is so true. I worked at IBM for 11 years, and I can tell you, I just love being around entrepreneurs. It's so much fun. And you have to embrace that kind of thing. You got to enjoy it because it's hard to be an entrepreneur. It is really hard to be an entrepreneur. There's so much kind of grinding you have to do. There's so many things that will go wrong. But you can't just want to be an entrepreneur. You have to have the skills. So you can't just send people into battle to say, go be an entrepreneur. You have to then back it up with the skills to make them successful. So we always talk about the spirit of a pirate, but you also have to have the execution skills of a Navy SEAL if you want to be successful. And this is what we're going to go through. I'm not going to emphasize this as much today. You'll kind of get the zen in the process. And if you get to come to MIT, you see our center, you go to Gareth's place, you'll see this. And that spirit, you can't lose that. Entrepreneurship is a mindset or a spirit. It's a skill set. We're going to talk about that today. And it's also, the last thing, it's a way of doing business, which is a community orientation. So I'm going to jump through all these slides, and you can go. I'll give you a website at the end if you're interested. And the 4 H's that we talk about, we have an apprenticeship model. We show that it's not linear to be an entrepreneur. I hope you're getting all this. And we talk that you have to have the heart to be an entrepreneur. You have to keep that spirit going. And if you're running a company, it starts to get bigger, you want it to stay entrepreneurial. You have to keep encouraging people that it's okay to fail. It's okay to fail smart, not just fail. But you got that spirit of a pirate you got to keep, but you have to have the knowledge of what it's like to take an idea and bring it to market. You have to then have the capability to do it. This is going from what's the first principles to the apprenticeship model, and then you have to have communities. And community is the least understood part of this, but it is very important, and you see this when people. Entrepreneurship was defined as the pursuit of opportunities with resources beyond your control by Bill Solomon of Harvard. And while that's an imperfect definition, it is a very important part of it. So when I worked at IBM, they would say, Bill, here is your team. You know, you are going to come out with the next personal computer. And Gethin, is that how you say it? Yeah. Gethin is very good at embedded coding. And this is your team, and you're to come out with the product in 2 years. And Gethin says, well, I'm not going to work on this anymore. And then we say, Gethin, you're not going to work on it? You're not part of us? You're dead to us. You no longer exist. Get out of here. I never want to see you again for the rest of my life. Who's the next embedded coder? What's your name? Anna. Anna comes in. We never see him again. He does not exist to us. Command, control, and conquer. We must control our resources. That model used to work. That model is defeated by the new community model of when you're working in spaces that if she wants something, she calls me up and says, hey, Bill, can you help me at MIT with this? And then I say, great, because she's a good community member, I will help her. And then Matt calls up and says, you know, I need something from Matt. I call him up, and he knows that I've helped. So now we're all part of the community. And this way of doing business by paying it forward that Gareth talked about is not just in your self-interest. When you build a community, it is incredibly powerful. And that's how you take down bigger companies. This goes to the Rudyard Kipling's. He said, the law of the jungle. The strength of the pack is in the wolf. Each of us have to be strong wolves. but the strength of the wolf is in the pack. So if we have a whole bunch of entrepreneurs and we're kind of this pack, even though we're not the same company, we can help each other. We defeat this command and control model. This is very inefficient because each of these people, I have to pay to be the best embedded coder they have, the best software coder, the best chip person. And now, if I want to still work with him, now he can do his thing over here, but I will trade what my expertise for his expertise. He keeps his expertise high. It's a much more dynamic model. All right, enough of the theory. Let's go to practice. All right, any questions before I jump in?